So apparently asylum seekers who have failed could be sent to return hubs in the Western Balkans. 5,025 illegal migrants have come to this country so far this year.
Did you think Labour would take a fundamentally different approach to immigration than the Conservatives? Think again. Their new plan to deport failed asylum seekers to Balkan return hubs mirrors policies they once condemned.
Labour is considering plans to deport, now this is the devil's in the detail, failed asylum seekers, wait for this, to the Balkans.
Only with different destination countries. Why is a government that campaigned against deportations now embracing them? What does this tell us about the realities of governing versus campaigning? And most importantly, why are they so desperate to hide the similarities between their plan and the previous government's Rwanda policy? The truth lies in the numbers. 42,000 asylum seekers currently await decisions in Britain, and public patience is running thin. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Remember when Keir Starmer and his Labour colleagues were absolutely outraged by the Rwanda scheme? It wasn't just something they disagreed with. They branded it unworkable, unethical, and extortionately expensive. These weren't casual remarks, but central campaign positions that helped define Labour as the compassionate alternative to conservative immigration policies. What a difference a few months in power makes.
Detention centres. I thought the whole point of the Rwanda issue that they had was about keeping people in locked detention centres and things like...
The speed of Labour's stunning U-turn on deportation policy reveals something far more troubling than simple political flexibility. This isn't a measured evolution of policy based on new evidence. It's a panicked scramble that exposes the hollow core of their previous moral posturing. After all, if your deeply held ethical concerns about deportation policies can evaporate within weeks of taking office, were they ever genuine? Let's examine what Labour is actually proposing with these new Balkan return hubs. The scheme centres on sending rejected asylum seekers to countries including Albania, Serbia, Bosnia, and North Macedonia. Each of these nations would receive financial compensation from the UK for every migrant they accept. Sound familiar? It should. This arrangement mirrors the fundamental structure of the Rwanda scheme that Labour so vehemently condemned.
So apparently asylum seekers who have failed could be sent to return hubs in the Western Balkans, like Albania, Serbia, Bosnia, North Macedonia.
The financial details deserve particular scrutiny. British taxpayers will effectively be funding these Balkan nations to take people the UK doesn't want. This creates a deeply problematic incentive structure where countries are financially rewarded for accepting human beings rejected by Britain. The ethical implications here are striking, particularly coming from a party that claimed the moral high ground just months ago.
Is that they only are going to deport failed asylum seekers. That squares with Keir Starmer's belief, doesn't it?
Wow.
Perhaps most puzzling is the UN's International Organization for Migration's apparent support for Labour's scheme. This same organization had previously criticized similar deportation plans, yet now seems willing to advise and assist participating nations in implementing the policy. This inconsistency raises serious questions about international standards and whether political considerations are influencing supposedly neutral humanitarian organizations. Albania represents a particularly interesting case study in this developing situation. The country already has detention centers originally constructed for an Italian asylum deal that could be repurposed to house migrants deported from Britain. These facilities, sitting ready and waiting, suggest Labour may have been exploring this option even while publicly condemning similar approaches. The parallels between Labour's Balkan scheme and the Conservative Rwanda policy are impossible to ignore. Both involve paying foreign countries to accept asylum seekers the UK has rejected.
Let's just look at the numbers that have come in. So 5,025 illegal migrants have come to this country so far this year.
Both outsource Britain's immigration responsibilities to nations with questionable human rights records. Both fundamentally treat asylum seekers as political problems to be relocated rather than individuals with legal rights. The core difference? One plan was proposed by the Conservatives and one by Labour. What's particularly revealing is how quickly Labour abandoned their previous position. This wasn't a gradual shift after months of careful consideration and consultation. This was a rapid pivot that suggests either complete political cynicism or a stunning naivety about the challenges of immigration policy. Either possibility is deeply concerning for a government that promised a new kind of politics. Labour's desperate scramble reflects a painful truth they were unwilling to admit during the campaign. They never had a viable alternative to deportation policies. All their moral grandstanding against the Conservatives was precisely that, grandstanding. When faced with the same pressures and public concerns about immigration, they've reached for essentially the same toolbox of solutions they once condemned. This sudden shift represents more than just a policy change. It's a betrayal of the voters who supported Labour precisely because of their supposed moral stance on immigration. It confirms what many suspected, that opposition to deportation was merely convenient political positioning rather than a principled stance.
Actually given legal counsel.
Citing Article 8.
Yeah, sorry, citing Article 8 and that Rwanda was not a safe place for them to go to. That's why.
What we're now witnessing is Labour's harsh initiation into the realities of government. The party that once positioned itself as the compassionate alternative is fracturing under pressure. Internal dissent is bubbling to the surface, with MPs like Diane Abbott publicly criticising the party's approach to welfare reforms.
Now, Labour, as you remember, came to power and got rid of the Rwanda policy.
Yep.
Some parliamentarians are sounding alarm bells that proposed welfare cuts could trigger significant internal conflict. This growing divide extends beyond immigration policy. Labour MPs are increasingly concerned about voter backlash to both the deportation scheme and welfare reductions. Starmer now faces the classic political dilemma: satisfy the public demanding tougher immigration control or placate his base, who expected a more humane approach. As migrant boats continue arriving and party unity crumbles, Starmer's government appears caught in a trap of its own making, doomed to repeat the very policies they once condemned. The question isn't whether principles will be compromised, but how many will fall before political survival instincts fully take over.